Yes.
Ready.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this candid conversation with Adriana Giraldo. And welcome, Adriana, and I'm so grateful to have you here. Adriana and me met up on a meeting with Dr. Scott Mills, and it was a session where I'd become quite emotional, and she reached out to me, and we've kept in touch ever since. And Adriana is a mind coach and a performance expert, and she is the founder of Consciousness to Wellness. Her passion is helping men and women suffering with eating disorders to move from the diet and exercise mentality into wellness that is holistic and all encompassing and full of self love. Welcome, Adriana. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Nalima. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'm so excited to be here and bring awareness to this issue that it's more common than we think. So thank you for bringing me in.
So, Adriana, why eating disorders, and how did you get interested in this field, and what brought you to design this program that you're developing?
So it led me from personal experience. So I did suffer from an eating disorder for quite a bit of time. Maybe I would say a little bit of over a couple of decades. So the frustration that led me to be more passionate about this subject was that the things that I went to treatment, to inpatient treatment, to therapy, and things were not working. And I know there was more to it than that. And this is not to say that therapy doesn't work, because it does work. I'm just saying in my experience, that's kind of what led me to explore this a little deeper. So as I continue to kind of fall in love with this, this new world of exercise, diet, food, behaviors, the way we think, then I realized eating disorders is just not two or three, the three more, the three more common diseases that are like anorexia, bulimia, or purging and bulimia, or a combination of those. There's a whole spectrum of them. And this is what people don't think sometimes. Uh, when for me is when there's a pattern of thinking where you're already obsessing over food, exercising, you're changing your whole, like your life is surrounded now, food, it kind of drives your main like your world. Then that's when those are the first warning signs. Now many people will end up, yeah, developing an eating disorder if the warning signs are not pay attention to, like in my case. And many times, a lot of people go up and about, but for me, the misery goes inside. They might not look underweight or overweight, either way of the spectrum that you put them, but still there's the struggle, the inner struggle, the criticism, and everything that is going on in the inside. So that's kind of what led me there and say, yeah, there's a way to get to the other side, as I call it.
Mhm.
And I know you're gonna mention a little bit about something about the disclaimer. That many times, depending on where you're at, yeah, certain tools will help you to move forward, but many times you actually have to stabilize the body before you tackle the mind, if
Yes.
that makes
Yes,
sense.
yes.
Mhm.
And I think, Adriana, you're very right in reminding me to say that disclaimer. So, number one, this is not a discussion about giving medical advice. We're talking about people with real problems and issues and understanding the mind body connection. If eating disorders can be a wide spectrum of problems, you can even end up on the side that's really dangerous, and it can be life threatening. So if anybody resonates with any of the topics that we're going to discuss today, if you feel you might have an eating disorder that's bordering on severe, do see your psychiatrist or psychologist or get referred. So, having said that,
Definitely.
actually, don't you think, Adriana, that nowadays, particularly with the kind of environment we live in, where there's food everywhere and there's temptation, I even wonder whether anybody is not a little bit, badly affected by the emotional eating spectrum. Certainly, I know that there's loads and loads of women, especially going through menopause, hormones. You can blame a whole
Hmm.
number of things that makes you just think of food all the time. The food is constantly on your mind. You can't get away from it. And somehow our food is a kind of addiction that you can't even do without. You can go for a 12-step program to get rid of alcohol or drugs or whatever. But what do you do with food? It's a kind of an addiction
Yeah,
stuck in your brain
it
and
is.
your body, because when you feel hungry, it's really
Mhm.
hard to not eat
Right.
or not think of
No,
food.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a good point. So there are a combination of factors, and I'll just mention, something brief because it goes more in depth at that. So it's not only the food itself, but it's also the behavior. So that's the other thing that we gotta consider. Not only the food, the addiction, to the food themselves, but it's also that the patterns of thinking. Once Many times we think about addiction as either food, drink, alcohol or drugs, but there are certain patterns of behavior that are also addictive, and that's where
Yes.
many times when you get to the anorexia and the bulimia and the purging, that's when that presents itself. But you can still have that, and not necessarily the addiction, but the kind of the obsessive and
Compulsion. Yeah.
the constant thinking. So one of the main things is that nowadays, just because of social media and the availability of information, we're bombarded 100% with everything that is going on in the environment, right? So before, food was just fuel for your body. You didn't think anything about it. I mean, you
Mhm.
would eat, lunch, breakfast, or snack, and that was about it. You go up in your day. But as people get more crafty with food, and then have these body images and this, so you have two things. You have the food itself and how people are creating a whole new world. Like, beautiful things can be done with food and more decadent, and you can
Like
go into the
MasterChef.
discussions about what
You
goes
have
in there,
MasterChef.
what's natural, what's not natural. Yeah, exactly. The master chef. Oh my God, this is delicious. And then you go also to the other side, which is the perception of the body image. So it's what is the attainment of perfection? Is it like a six pack or thickness, or what is it? So you have two worlds that are very closely related, right? Because your food, it's fueling your body, but they go hand in hand, and also with whatever is going on with your patterns of thought and thinking. So but now, like, the information is just right in front of us. And what has happened is they have overlap in certain areas where we equate them as, let's say, if you have certain body image, then that's the attainment of perfection, then this is what you should be attaining for. Or the same thing with foods. This is the kind of diet that you should do if you want to do this is the kind of thing, of foods that that you should eat if you want to accomplish certain things. And not all bodies are the same. So and there's studies that have shown, even if you're vegan, if you're in ketosis, I mean, if you go into the keto diet, or just completely vegetarian, as long as you're eating in a way that is not necessarily compulsive or obsessive, either diet is going to work for you.
Yeah.
So it's when the behaviors start coming in, and the thoughts in addition to that keep reinforcing each other. So
Yeah.
that's when the issue starts presenting. um, yeah.
And women suffer particularly more, but you've noticed that it's not like that. How do women and men come to you, and what is their predominant problem? Do they just come for weight loss, or do they have other things on their mind, or is like, I mean, being obese or being overweight or being very underweight can be a factor of not enough nutrition anyway. But how do men and
Right.
women, what do they come to you with? What is the main problem? Is it just lose weight?
No, and it's actually interesting. Many times the underlying issue, especially for people, let's say if they're not severely underweight, right?
Right.
Because it gets to a point when, okay, you already got the weight, it doesn't matter. The thinking is still there.
Ah,
So um, so for men, it shows a little bit differently. They may be a little bit more obsessive with exercise, with
mm,
movement. And it's all about muscle gain, or how do it's about big and looking differently, and work a lot of working out, even though it shows up in women as well. We may go in the opposite way as attaining fitness, and how thin or how skinny am I going to look, am I going to have the six pack, the bod, the legs, or all those things. And I would say funny but not funny, because many times when I'm approaches, they feel exhausted, they feel stuck, they feel unworthy. That's
Mm,
very common. Like, I don't feel worthy. I'm not able to move forward because I just feel that I'm not worth of certain things. And the issue was nothing to do with food, but once you start having those conversations, it relates to the behaviors that the person is doing every time the thought comes up, and then how it goes deeper than that. So you go back and look at how people, not necessarily what happened to the individual, because this is what I like to do, is not necessarily focus on what is it that happened with you, but more on how you structure and how you organize your thoughts and behavior, so we can kind of move them and rewire them in a different way. So lack of motivation, lack of drive, I feel empty, lots of isolation. Isolation is a big one. And the main reason for that is because once you start changing your patterns of food and eating, um, it shows that you start driving all your, like all your behaviors in your life around that. So you start eating by yourself, you start developing certain patterns. So that creates kind of a sort of isolation, from your family, from social. So that's also one of the kind of the biggest red flags, that
mhm.
necessarily people think, yeah, no, it doesn't have to do anything with food, but there's sometimes they're very closely related. um, they feel emotionally depleted, a lot of fear. They become a lot, fearful for to do a lot of the things that they want to do.
Mhm.
It also, comes from there too. And of course, the diet and exercise. I want to lose a number, X pounds so I can fit in my dress, or I want to lose this, and but it's not. They're not looking for sustainability. It's just for an attainment for a certain look. So, what is it that that look is gonna give you? So that's what I look at as well.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
Mhm.
one of the things I found with sort of the problem begins very young. So for most women, and I can only go by my example, that it begins in childhood. So it might begin in your teenage years. And you might go through a period where you cope quite well, you still have the body. But as you hit menopause, suddenly what used to work in the youth, the dieting and the exercise pattern that worked when you were young doesn't work anymore. And a lot of women find that
Mhm.
when they exercise, it actually stresses out their body more. So they have higher cortisol levels, and they don't lose the weight, and they actually put on more belly fat because of excess cortisol levels. So in your experience, um, how do women cope with this problem around menopause? Because I'm sure the eating disorders crop up again as they go through this there's a resistant period through menopause.
Mhm. Yes, that's a good question. So it goes deeper than that, because in menopause there are so many components, so many elements affecting this. It's not only um, it's the hormonal. Everything is kind of changing inside. It's like you're revamping. It's like you're doing a renovation in a house. Like, let's say we're gonna paint it, we're gonna take these out. So that's kind of what it's think. The body's going through a whole revamp, and you know it more than anybody. As a doctor. So many times what we tend to do is work with doing the same things that we used to do when we were younger, or the mechanisms that we were doing, back when we were younger, um, trying to apply the same in the same way that we're doing it. And that doesn't, many times, and most of the time, doesn't work. So that's when the frustration comes in.
Mhm.
So when you hit menopause, there are things that can be done, that it's like you have to do little structural changes, behavioral changes. Yeah, diet and exercise is it's also a component, but it's not the main component. And that's many times what we focus on is, okay, yeah, I have to eat less and exercise more. Well, no, as you mentioned, that's going to create more strain in your body. So it's what kind of behaviors can actually be accompanied, so you can actually play with your hormones, with your enzyme, with the whole thing that is going on inside your body, so you can adjust your diet. You don't have to restrict. And also, you can be kind to your body when you're doing exercise, so you don't strain it. This is what happens too, is when people want. So for me, and so that's one factor. Then the other thing is, okay, you want to lose weight, right? And in men, so what's behind the weight? And like, do you want to lose the weight? And not that I'm an opposition or an objection to losing the weight, because my main interest is like, okay, if that's something that you're looking for, is like, what is that going to give you? What's the main
Mm,
intention after going for that, for those less 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever it is. And the reason for that is because if that's something, if they know, if they can anchor a reason on why they're doing it, like the sense of urgency, then they can go ahead and do it, and it's more sustainable than if it's just to lose a couple pounds,
yeah.
because it becomes kind of a cycle, right? So let's say, yes, people, women, when they hit the menopause, they start hitting the menopause cycle, then yes, they lose a couple pounds, but then they might gain them again, and then they don't know, they get frustrated, and then it's all over again. So it's okay. So fine tuning the reason why, the urgency, the motivation, that is really what is it that they want, and how we can make it sustainable. Because
Yeah.
for me is the sustainability portion, because you
Mm,
want to
mm,
be able to keep it on, not
yeah.
just to lose a couple pounds
Yeah.
momentarily.
Yeah.
So
It needs to be a change for uh, a better life, um, that you
mhm.
can see yourself doing in the long term. Now, when when you find somebody, and I suppose many young people and older people come to you for this, how do
Mhm.
you help them to discover what problems are causing their eating disorders? What emotional stuff are there? How do you help them to uncover the emotions that's causing them to eat in a way that's not good for them?
So, and it's a good question. So it all depends on how the conversation evolves. But let's say we have somebody that feels unworthy or becomes isolated. So go a little bit deeper than that. Not necessarily what happened in the past, but is it what is it that they're doing now? Like, tell me a little bit. When you do that, what is it? What is it that happened at that moment? So it's like we're trying to. Um, we're looking to see even the most subtle type of thought or behavior. What is it that you keep telling yourself or doing
Mm,
anytime the thought comes up? So let's say recently I worked with someone that said, every time I feel like I've eaten too much, I want to go and hide.
mm,
And this is because, let's say when I feel unworthy when I'm with people, I get a little bit anxious. And the conversation started in a whole different subject. But it was just give me an example of, what happens when the thought comes, the thought comes up, and then go from there, so they can start describing what is it they do, what is it that comes up, and see if there's a pattern that they keep doing and doing again. Um, so that's kind of one of the first thing, that where you're starting to kind of notice, okay, there's something here. So how can that be linked to something that they've been doing in the past that they haven't told anybody? Because this is the other thing. Shame is a big thing.
yes.
For me, I can tell it was shameful. It was huge. I wouldn't reach out to people because it was a sense of shame. Like, how do you dare to do that, or how do you dare to have an eating disorder, or or you seem so normal. It's like I almost felt like I have to explain to people, and that was kind of my biggest block, right? Um, and and many times that's what's happened to people as well. Like, yeah, why would you worry if you let's say with this person that I worked and that I worked recently, is, yeah, you don't seem like that. I mean, are you sure you have that problem? So it puts the person in like, am I crazy? Am I not? Is it okay? So it's a kind of a weird situation where the person says, you know what, maybe, yeah, let's just put it to a side, right? Let's push it to the side and keep moving. But it's still there.
It's still there.
So,
Yes, yes.
and I
And
hope that answers the question. Yeah.
how, when somebody's finally overcome their like, these demons, these food demons and madness around constantly thinking about the next meal and what they're going to eat and what they're not going to eat, and whether somebody's going to see them or not, and whether they're going to go be a restaurant, is there going to be something that they like to eat over there, can they eat something, or they're going to have to go hungry, blah blah blah
Mhm.
blah blah. How do they know that they've actually overcome their problems? Is it, do these thoughts
Oh,
stop, or is there something else?
That's a powerful, yeah, that's $1 million question. So yes, so actually that's when you notice that 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 you actually have been able to work through that, because you're not thinking about it. So let's say you're some there's a party going on and there's gonna be food around. You actually are not even worried about what is it that they're gonna serve. You're actually, oh my God, I'm so excited about the party, or I'm gonna see this person. You're actually not even worried about, you're not looking at the menu, you're not thinking, okay, so if I ate right now, then I cannot eat later.
Yeah.
Or when you're at the party or the meeting or whatever it is, you're not looking at what people are eating, because that's the other sign, right? Many times we're looking at what people are eating. That's one of the red flags. I'm like, okay, so if that person had seconds, I can have seconds.
Ah,
Or maybe that person started eating, now I can start eating. So once those thoughts are no longer there, and you notice, like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that, and I had such a good time. Or it, that's when you start realizing, okay, yes, something is working. And yeah, it may take a little bit of time, and maybe there's certain contexts where you'll be okay going to a restaurant, but not necessarily to a party. But those are the things that we calibrate and that we work through, so we can see, okay, when the thoughts are no longer there, then that's when you realize, yeah, food is food.
yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah,
Just like a car is a car, that's what it is. Exercise is exercise. It's something that you do it, you don't do it. You don't over obsess, unless you want to be in a competition or something, or you're an athlete. But other than that, you start assuming things as just as they are. You
yeah,
don't have an emotional charge to it. You don't measure yourself to it, like, am I do I can I do this, do I have permission to do that, can I eat more, can I not? So yes.
wow, that is really powerful. And I remember the question that happened when we were with Dr. Scott Mills, and he was describing how there wasn't permission to be angry, to discuss emotions, and that was what got me triggered, because it suddenly triggered this memory that I had sitting at the dining table, being really angry and tearful, and eating to stuff it down. So for many years until quite recently, I don't actually remember tasting beyond the first bite of food I had. My mom's an amazing cook, and I love food. I love eating out. I love eating her food. But honestly, for the longest time, I don't remember really tasting every morsel of my food. And there's n number of kind of programs I've done, EFT, trying to slow down eating and eat less. But there was always this kind of hole, you eat to fill a hole. It wasn't about nourishment and stuff. It's not until I did Wild Fit that my relationship with food has changed. I don't think I've overcome everything, but I'm over, I
Mhm.
would say, at least 80% of the way. I'm much better. And you wouldn't describe me as somebody, I wouldn't have described myself as having an eating disorder. But now when you're talking
Exactly.
about the self-esteem, the self-worth, the emotions that get
Mhm.
buried, I can see that there's a lot more women and men out there who might have a problem with eating and emotions. So that's
Exactly.
truly
And
slowing
yeah,
them.
and that's no, that's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. So one of the main things is creating that disconnection between, by the time you feel that emotion, because this is the thing, that the body and the mind is one. They work in conjunction, right? And it's not like, oh my gosh, the mind and body connection. No, it actually it's very, very true, and we don't see it that way. Is that anger that you felt has such a physiological response in you, that by the behavior of you engaging is like you were not even thinking about what you were eating. For you, it was, how can I get through the moment of anger, right? I want to just get through it because I'm so angry right now, I just want to get through it. But then if you keep doing it, or depending on how emotionally charged was that anger. I mean, if you felt like really, really angry, and you fought, you fought to overcome it, but then you kept eating it, that link, that connection that you created, then that's what led to probably not enjoying the meal, or you forgetting, I'm eating, but I don't even know why I'm eating.
Yeah,
So until that disconnection is done, then we can start having the conversation. Oh, okay, yeah, I see what I'm doing now. But many times that's what's difficult to see, is because we think it's about, yeah, I want to look good, and that's why I'm eating. No, it's not about that. Is what is it that is letting me to continually recreate the same thought and the same behavior, even though if I want to do something else, because it's so
Yeah.
unconscious.
Yeah.
That for if it were to be conscious, then we would have changed our behavior a long time ago. But because it's so unconscious, we just do it. That's when we have to break that linkage.
And sometimes eating becomes a way to get control. So not eating, this whole new trend about fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting or long fasting or water fasting, and there's so many benefits to fasting, but I'm sure people who have eating disorders can misuse fasting quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
And it can end up a way of not really loving yourself very much, because it's a way of getting control, of saying no to something. I certainly know that when I'm trying to fast and my mother's like, no, you've got to eat. I said, no, I'm not going to eat. There's like so much emotion. It's not comfortable. It's not easy to just not eat,
Exactly.
because the culture
Right.
around eating is so ingrained. You're not allowed to just be. As a human being, human beings in our bodies, we know when our body doesn't need food, and maybe we're sick, we've got tonsils or whatever, and you don't want to swallow. It's very natural to go without food for quite some time,
Mm-hmm.
but your culture, your environment at home doesn't allow you to do that. And it's so tied up with,
That's a, yeah.
eating and food. I think only human beings punish themselves this way.
Yes.
I don't know any
And
animal.
that's a, yeah. No, that's a very good point. So and that's what I'm saying is, like, it's not necessarily that you have to have been diagnosed with an eating disorder. And right now, you can, if you look it up, they have expanded the definition of an eating disorder, right? It's like any psychological behaviors that they have around food and about eating pattern, anything that you have developed. So, but to your point is, many times we feel that pressure. So I can tell you, for example, like the intermittent fasting. Yeah, that could be, like I tried it, right? But for me, trying it, there is a very thin line. There is a very fine line where it could go in the wrong way,
Yeah.
just because of my history. So what I had to do is, like, if I'm doing it, what is it that I'm doing it? Well, it is because I'm eating after 9 p.m., then it gives me a heartburn. Then yeah, I want to feel like comfortable. Then that could be a reason why I'm doing fasting. Not to say that if let's say we're gonna go to a restaurant and there's a party, I can still eat. So having that flexibility is, again, what is that you're doing, and if they don't become too rigid. So
Mm,
like, if you don't want to eat, it's okay. I'm not hungry at this time, I'll probably eat later.
yeah.
But not having to follow a rigid either schedule or any social pressure to eat necessarily, because that's what creates the emotional charge.
Yes, yes. And it's very hard to come out of it. Now, one of the things
Mhm.
you teach people is their self-love, self-worth, and how building this kindness and compassion towards yourself, to manage this. So, how can you
Mhm.
explain a little bit? How do people? What is it about this that people respond to, and how do they implement it?
So one of the things is that so for me, you don't go directly to the self-esteem or like the confidence piece, because many times that's what people want to go through. It's like, oh yeah, I wanna feel better about myself, the self-esteem. For me, self-esteem is um, so self-esteem is how you can see the feelings towards yourself, right? But underneath those feelings, there's some thoughts and some behaviors that are building that up. So in when we work together, it's I would like to see what is it that is letting you to create these patterns of behaviors, and how we can move them forward, right? How can we change them? The first step is, first of all, is awareness. For me, is and also the decision of you actually to wanting to do something about it. Because unless you want to do something about it and you acknowledge that there's certain things that are not working out for you, then nothing will change. um, the beauty of the human being is that we're transformable. We can change. Many times we think, oh, because we're old we cannot change. No, we cannot learn new things. No, indeed we can. It may be a little bit challenging, and it's frustrating, but that doesn't mean that we're not able to. So what I do is not tackle the problem per se directly to food and say, hey, you change your perception about food, but what is it that it's I want to see what is it that is connecting the dots. What is it that you equated, let's say, the anger or the sadness with the food and the eating pattern? Like, how did these two get married, and how you equated, let's say, or another example is that a perfect body will equate perfection, and then perfectionism will equate that I'm a good person. How did we get there? And not necessarily with what happened in the past, but how is it that you equated those two thoughts to equate something else? So body image, for example, I'll give you a personal example. So for me, and you usually target certain parts of your body many times. You don't like your belly, you don't like your arms, you don't like your legs. The legs are too fat. So for me, were my legs. I'm a Latina, so I have big legs and good legs, right? So for me, that was like, okay, they're too thick, right? And so it's like, what is that body part representing? I mean, and there's something else attached to the body part, and that it doesn't even become around food. It doesn't matter if you didn't eat; you're still gonna see them in a different way. It doesn't matter what you do; you're already focused 100% in certain part, in a body part or in a certain behavior. So that's what we start looking at it as well. It's like, what is it that you do, or I call, like, what is your punching bag? Because many times we use our body as a punching bag, right? Like, my legs are my punching bag, or many times one behavior is your punching bag. Like, yeah, I go to that because, yes, I know that's gonna be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Cool. This has been such an interesting, exciting conversation. Um, we're coming to the end of this. Um, what advice do you have for menopausal women listening to this uh, discussion? What tips could you give them about how to look at their bodies, changing bodies, their discomfort with their bodies, and then relating it to eating and food consumption and weight, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So one way is, and for me, working with women with menopause is not the end, because this is many times what has happened is not the end of womanhood.
No.
It's not that everything is pausing. So many times that's the underlying thinking is like, oh, this is it. I mean, like, I hate this. So it's so unconscious that it's like invisible boundary that we have. Is like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm from here. I don't know what else is going to be. So I like to look at that, because once that's worked on, then it can open the possibility for them. Okay, you know, this is how it is. This is what we need to start doing now. So it's the changing of not only behaviors, it's what elements can we introduce to make things easier for you, that actually are going to be they might or might not be difficult, but they're going to be different to what you are doing. Maybe the eating schedule is not going to be the same, and or maybe we can trick the body and use some of the, because I do like to work with the whole body, like, what is it that we can work with in terms of the hormones and the enzymes, so we can actually respond to our hunger in an easier way. What exercise it's actually appropriate for me. Not everybody's a runner, not everybody is going to lift weights. So I like to kind of customize it. So it's because it's so different each of the women, that it's not like you cannot lump them all together, go ahead and do that. And so for me, and I look at this, I was reading this the other days. Menopause is like me, not pause. Like, you're not pausing your life because this is happening. Like, you can continue. There's a lot more to it. It's just that we're switching things. It's like when things go, but when you have a house and the house is, becomes, things start, the pipes start not working. You just you fix them. You take a different approach, and that's it. And also having the because as we go through stages in life, is also an adjustment, right? When we think from childhood to teenager, it's how we can create that independence, and it's the same thing when we reach that age. Is like, okay, it's okay for me to be this and have experienced these changes, which many times
Yeah,
that's not what is done.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's the empowerment of that process as you go through menopause.
Right.
Thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful
Exactly.
discussion. What's new for
Yeah, no, it's
2021, Adriana? What's new for 2021, and how do people get in touch with you?
so they can contact me via email, and I can send you the information. So
On
they can, the
Ethical
best way
Chat.
is contact via email. Hmm.
Is it the
Oh
same
yeah,
email?
I'll put it on the,
The same email address?
yes, the same.
Okay,
Hmm.
I'll put
Yeah,
it.
and I can put it in the chat. The other thing is that so I'll be launching my course. Um, it will have a one-on-one component if people are interested in the one-on-one component coaching, but also a group coaching. And it's not only about teaching what to do, but it's just having kind of an explanation of um, doing it. For me, it's a journey, right? It's how to people gain that awareness, and once you're ready to change, make that decision, and then how we can start changing those patterns of behaviors, and what is it we know, what exercises we can do, and not necessarily brain, not necessarily physical exercises, but also brain exercises.
Yeah,
What is it that we can do to start tweaking those kind of things? So I'm excited to launch this, because right now people are obsessed about perfection, body, everything is bombarded. Like if you don't attend, especially when summertime comes, right?
yeah,
Everybody wants to reach the beach body perfection.
yeah, yeah.
And so as time moves on, I want to be able to say, hey, let let's put the body aside for a second. Let's tackle what's going on inside, and then the body will come, as long as the person is in a stable condition, of course.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And
It's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I'm sure lots of people have had fresh insights into their eating patterns. I certainly have. And it's been an
thank you.
absolute pleasure and privilege having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nalima. I really appreciate it. And then I'm gonna put my email here at the bottom so people can reach me, and we can have a conversation. I offer in kind of a strategy calls for 30 minutes, and we can go from there and see what's going on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye,
All
everyone.
right.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye bye.